The auditorium lights glowed bright and warm, washing over the polished stage where a row of gold-plated trophies waited. Parents shifted in their seats, phones poised in their hands, ready to capture the moment. Teachers smiled with practiced pride, the kind that had rehearsed itself over dozens of ceremonies like this one. It was the end of the school year, the night when names would be called, applause would rise, and futures would feel a little more certain. In the third row, Amira Lewis sat upright, her palms slick with sweat against the folds of her dress. At 16, she was already accustomed to being watched by teachers who didn't expect her to excel, by classmates who whispered in disbelief when she did. Tonight was supposed to be different. Tonight, she wasn't just Amira, the quiet black girl from a working-class family. Tonight, she was the student of the year. Everyone knew it. Her grades had led the class all year. Her science fair project had won at the district level. Her essays were pinned to bulletin boards as examples of excellence. Friends had squeezed her shoulder earlier that day and said, "It's yours, Amira, finally yours." Even her mother, who had rushed straight from a night shift at the hospital, had put on her best blouse, the one she saved for church and graduations. Her father, camera balanced carefully in his lap, whispered, "Get ready, baby. This is your night." Amira had even written a speech. Just a few sentences, folded neatly in the pocket of her dress. Words about hard work, about believing that effort could break ceilings, about her family who had carried her here. She had practiced it in front of the mirror until she could say it without glancing down. When the principal stepped up to the microphone, the air stilled. This was the award everyone waited for, the crown jewel of the night. He cleared his throat, his smile practiced and wide. And this year's Student of the Year award goes to... Amira's chest tightened. Her fingers brushed the folded speech in her pocket. To Tyler Reynolds. For a heartbeat, the room was silent. A name no one expected. Tyler, an average student, friendly, but far from the top of the class. A boy whose parents donated to the school fundraiser every year. A boy whose grades trailed far behind Amira's. The silence cracked into applause, awkward at first, then louder as people tried to fill the void. Amira blinked, her throat dry. She felt her mother's hand slide into us, gripping it tightly, as if to steady her from crumbling. Her father lowered his camera, his jaw tightening. On stage, Tyler grinned wide, accepting the trophy as though he had earned it. The principal patted him on the back, beaming as cameras flashed. The applause swelled, but to Amira, it was muffled, distant, like she was underwater. Her heart pounded, her face hot. The speech in her pocket suddenly felt heavy, like lead. She looked down at her shoes, the old pair she'd worn all year, scuffed but sturdy. And a thought pierced through the haze, bitter and sharp. What more did I have to prove? The night that should have been her victory had turned into her betrayal. And somewhere deep in her chest, between humiliation and heartbreak, something else sparked, something that would not stay silent. If you've ever worked harder than anyone else only to see your moment handed to someone else, Amira's story will feel painfully familiar. Stay with us, because what comes next will shake an entire community. Hit like, drop a comment, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the truth behind what really happened that night.
Amira Lewis's story didn't begin on a stage under bright lights. It began in a modest apartment above a noisy corner store in Queens, New York, where the hum of traffic mixed with the smell of fried food from the street below. Her world was small but steady, held together by the love of parents who worked themselves past exhaustion to give her a chance at more. Her mother, Denise, was a nurse who picked up double shifts at the local hospital. She came home with tired eyes and aching feet, but she always asked Amira about her homework before even sitting down. Her father, Charles, drove a city bus, his days a carousel of faces, stops, and endless traffic lights. His evenings were spent fixing whatever broke in the building, and making sure Amira knew that, no matter how hard the world outside could be, home was safe. Books became Amira's sanctuary. By the age of 10, she was devouring novels far beyond her grade level. Teachers noticed, some with admiration, some with suspicion. "Did you really write this essay yourself?" one teacher had asked after Amira turned in a paper that earned top marks. The doubt stung, but it also lit something inside her, a fire to prove she was not just capable, but exceptional. Through middle school and into high school, that fire only grew. Amira didn't just want good grades, she wanted to be the best. She stayed after class, asked for extra assignments, and entered competitions her peers shied away from. When her friends were at the mall, she was in the library, hunched over a stack of books. Her parents never pressured her to excel. They simply reminded her that education was the ladder she could climb out of limits they had faced. "Baby," her mother would say, brushing Amira's hair back after a long night, "some folks are born with doors wide open. For us, you'll have to knock louder, but don't you ever stop knocking." She believed her. She believed that if she knocked loud enough, through her grades, her awards, her endless effort, the door would open. By junior year, she was at the top of her class. Teachers couldn't deny her brilliance, though some still looked at her with that flicker of surprise, as though excellence didn't belong to her skin. Her science fair project on renewable energy earned her first place at the district level, a win that landed her photo in the local paper. Her essay on civil rights leaders won a statewide competition, earning her a certificate signed by the governor. It wasn't just talent, it was grit. Every victory came with sacrifice. Late nights while her mother worked hospital shifts, mornings when she packed her father's lunch before racing to catch the school bus. She missed birthday parties, movies, even sleepovers. But when she saw her name at the top of the honor roll, she told herself it was worth it. The school itself, however, told a different story. Posters plastered on walls proclaimed diversity and excellence in bold fonts. Administrators boasted about inclusion in newsletters. Yet when it came to the reality of who was chosen for leadership roles, who was celebrated in assemblies, and whose parents were invited to private dinners with the principal, patterns emerged. Still, Amira refused to see the cracks. She wanted to believe her world was fair. She told herself that the whispers didn't matter, that her work would speak so loudly it couldn't be ignored. And as the end-of-year ceremony approached, she believed more than ever that she was about to step into the recognition she had earned. She had done everything right. She had knocked until her knuckles bled. Surely the door would finally open. But as she would soon discover, some doors aren't locked by effort alone. They're locked by bias, hidden behind smiles and polished speeches. And that night on stage, Amira would learn just how heavy those locks could be.
The days leading up to the awards ceremony felt like a countdown to destiny. The hallways at school buzzed with end-of-year excitement, lockers slamming, students comparing final grades, teachers reminding everyone to return textbooks. Yet, beneath the everyday chaos, Amira felt a current of expectation building around her. "Girl, you already know it's yours," one of her classmates, Kayla, whispered during lunch. "You're Student of the Year, period." Even Mr. Hammond, her history teacher, had dropped hints. When he handed back her final essay, he leaned closer and said, "Make sure your parents bring a camera to the ceremony." He winked before moving on, leaving Amira with a rush of pride and nerves tangled in her stomach. At home, the atmosphere matched her anticipation. Her mother requested time off from her night shift weeks in advance. "I'm not missing this for the world," she told her coworkers, smiling through tired eyes. Her father polished the old camcorder he had used for every birthday and recital.
We're going to catch the moment right, he said, testing the buttons, making Amira laugh when he accidentally recorded himself mumbling. Amira herself prepared in her own quiet way. She chose a simple but elegant dress, second-hand but pressed perfectly. She spent nights after homework rehearsing a short speech, just in case. She didn't want to sound ungrateful or arrogant. She wanted her words to reflect the truth, that hard work mattered, that doors could open for anyone willing to put in the effort. She practiced in the mirror, her reflection whispering back lines she had memorized by heart. The school, too, seemed to play into the expectation. Flyers announced the ceremony as a celebration of excellence and achievement. The principal, Mr. Carter, made speeches during morning announcements about the importance of recognizing leaders of tomorrow. In Amira's chest, hope swelled like a balloon. She thought, maybe they finally see me. On the day of the event, the gymnasium transformed into a theater of anticipation. Folding chairs lined up in neat rows. The stage was dressed with banners in school colors, and trophies gleamed beneath the harsh glow of stage lights. Parents filed in, their chatter echoing off the high ceilings. The smell of polished wood and faint cleaning supplies filled the air. Amira's friends found her before the program began, hugging her tightly. "Don't be nervous," she teased. "You're about to be famous." Her mother smoothed down her hair one last time before taking her seat, her hands trembling slightly as though she felt the weight of the moment too. Her father positioned himself at the perfect angle, the camcorder's little red light blinking. As Amira sat waiting, her heart pounded against her ribs. She pressed her hands together to stop the trembling. She reminded herself of every late night, every notebook filled with scribbles, every sacrifice her parents had made. Tonight, it would all add up. Tonight, her name would be called. And yet, somewhere deep in her chest, a tiny thread of doubt tugged. Memories flashed uninvited. The teacher who once asked if she had really written her essay. The sideways glances when she won awards too easily. The feeling of being exceptional, but never celebrated the same way as others. She swallowed the thought, pushing it down. Not tonight, she told herself. Tonight is mine. But destiny, as Amira was about to learn, doesn't always reward hard work. Sometimes it exposes the quiet injustices hiding behind polished smiles.
The auditorium seemed to hold its breath as Principal Carter stepped up to the microphone. His voice carried with the practiced confidence of someone used to commanding attention. Parents straightened, phones raised higher, students leaned forward, eyes wide. "This," he said, pausing for effect, "is the most prestigious award of the evening. The Student of the Year is not just about grades, but leadership, character, and the ability to represent our school with pride." Amira's pulse thudded in her ears. Her fingers brushed the folded note in her dress pocket, the speech she had rehearsed 100 times. She glanced toward her parents, her mother smiling through weary eyes, her father with the camcorder steady, red light glowing. Around her, classmates exchanged knowing looks. Everyone expected the same name. "And the award goes to—" Principal Carter's lips curved into a smile, and in that split second, Amira felt the world shift toward her. She inhaled sharply, ready to stand. Until Tyler Reynolds." The name hit her like a stone through glass. For a moment, silence hung in the air. Confusion flickered across the faces of students and parents alike. Then came the applause, hesitant, uneven at first, before growing louder, as though people clapped to cover their surprise. Tyler rose from his seat, his cheeks flushing with pride. He wasn't a bad student, but he wasn't top of the class. His grades were good, not extraordinary. His projects were solid, not groundbreaking. But he walked to the stage with confidence, shaking the principal's hand as if the trophy had always been meant for him. Amira sat frozen, her breath caught in her throat. She could feel her mother's hand clutch hers, squeezing tight, trying to offer comfort. Her father lowered the camcorder slightly, his lips pressed into a thin line. The sound of clapping roared around her, but to Amira it felt hollow, distorted, like she was underwater. Her eyes blurred as Tyler lifted the trophy, grinning for the cameras. The flash of bulbs captured his moment, a moment Amira had worked her whole life for. Her heart pounded. She could still feel the folded paper in her pocket, the speech she had rehearsed 100 times. A knot of shame and disbelief twisted in her stomach. She thought back to every extra credit project, every night she stayed up late studying while others slept. She remembered the times teachers had looked at her work with suspicion, asking if she'd had help. She remembered being passed over for smaller awards in the past, telling herself it didn't matter, that the big one, the one that really counted, would be hers. And now it wasn't. On stage, Principal Carter beamed as he patted Tyler's shoulder. The cameras clicked, the parents applauded, but Amira sat still, staring at the polished shoes she had worn for this night. Shoes that carried her through every hallway, every classroom, every moment she had fought to prove herself. What more did I have to prove? The question looped in her mind, sharp and relentless. Her mother's hand tightened on hers again. This time Amira didn't squeeze back. She kept her eyes fixed on the stage, her jaw clenched, her heart breaking in silence, while the world pretended nothing was wrong.
The ceremony dragged on, but for Amira, time had stopped at the sound of Tyler's name. She sat stiff in her chair, clapping when expected, smiling faintly when her classmates turned to look, but inside, her chest was hollow. The applause, the speeches, the polite laughter, it all blurred into meaningless noise. When it was finally over, parents gathered in clusters to take photos, students swapped yearbooks for signatures, and teachers offered congratulatory handshakes. Amira slipped away quietly, her mother following close behind, her father trailing with the camcorder dangling uselessly at his side. In the car ride home, silence pressed down like heavy fog. The hum of the engine filled the void until her father spoke, his voice tight with restraint. "You should have been the one on that stage tonight." Amira stared out the window, blinking fast to keep the tears from spilling. Her mother reached back from the passenger seat, fingers brushing Amira's knee. "Baby, don't let this break you. You are still everything you've worked for. No one can take that from you." But it didn't feel that way. It felt like everything she'd worked for had been stolen in front of her, openly, unapologetically. The next day at school, whispers followed her like shadows. Friends tried to comfort her. "You know you deserved it, Amira," Kayla said, pulling her into a hug. Another classmate added, "Tyler's cool and all, but everyone knows that award should have been yours." Their words were meant as balm, but instead they deepened the sting. Knowing everyone saw the truth didn't make the injustice easier to bear, it made it more unbearable. Later in the cafeteria, Amira overheard laughter at a nearby table. A group of students joked about how Tyler's dad had probably bought the award with his latest donation to the school. Amira clenched her jaw, stabbing at her food without appetite. It wasn't just bias, it was favoritism dressed up as character. That night, she sat at her desk, staring at the folded speech she had pulled from her pocket. The words blurred as tears finally spilled. She crumpled the page, tossing it toward the trash but missing. It lay on the floor, a small white reminder of everything she hadn't been allowed to say. Her father knocked gently and stepped in. He looked at the paper, then at his daughter. "You thinking about quitting?" he asked quietly. Amira hesitated. Her throat tightened as she whispered, "What's the point, Dad? If no matter how hard I work, they'll always pick someone else." Charles sat on the edge of her bed, sighing heavily. "The point is, You don't let them decide who you are. You don't let them win by giving up. They want you to believe you're invisible, but you're not. You're the brightest light in that whole damn school." His words sparked something small inside her, a flicker, faint but persistent. She thought of her mother's sacrifices, of every night she had stayed awake to study, and of the pride she had felt seeing her name on the top of the honor roll. Maybe the trophy wasn't hers, but the truth still was. Still, the question lingered in the quiet of her room. If truth wasn't enough to win fairness, then what was? Amira lay awake long after the house had gone silent, staring at the ceiling, the injustice heavy on her chest. She didn't know it yet, but that night marked the beginning of a choice, whether to stay silent or to stand and fight.
Amira's anger simmered just beneath the surface in the days that followed. She went through the motions, classes, homework, end-of-year goodbyes, but each smile felt forced, each step heavier than the last. The gold trophy Tyler carried in the halls was a constant reminder of what she had been denied. One afternoon, while helping a teacher clean up the science lab, Amira's curiosity pulled her toward the bulletin board where final grades were posted. She scanned the list, eyes darting down the columns. Her GPA was the highest in the class, higher than Tyler's by a wide margin. The numbers stared back at her like irrefutable proof. "Looking for something?" Mrs. Patel, her science teacher, asked gently. Amira hesitated, then blurted out, "Why didn't I get the award?" Mrs. Patel's smile faltered. She looked around the empty room before lowering her voice. "Amira, sometimes decisions aren't about numbers." "What do you mean?" The teacher sighed, setting down the stack of papers in her hands. "There are conversations that happen in the office. Conversations about who looks good on the school's website, who the donors will like seeing in a brochure. It's not fair, but it's real." The words stung worse than the trophy slipping from her hands. It wasn't that she had failed, it was that her success had never mattered. That night, Amira opened her laptop and combed through the school's website. Photos from previous years filled the screen. Smiling white faces, holding trophies, standing beside principals in tailored suits. She scrolled back 5 years, 10 years. The pattern was the same. Her chest tightened, fury replacing despair. She printed her report cards, her certificates, her competition wins. She placed them in a neat folder, each page a piece of evidence. At the back, she added the class GPA sheet she had copied down from the bulletin board. When her parents found her at the dining table, papers spread like battle plans. Her father raised an eyebrow. "What's all this?" Amira looked up, eyes burning with determination. "Proof! If they want to pretend I didn't earn it, I'm going to show them the truth." Her mother sat beside her, brushing her hand. "Baby, the truth doesn't always change their minds." "Then I'll make them listen," Amira said, her voice steady. Over the next few days, she drafted a letter to the principal and the school board. She outlined her achievements, attached the documents, and asked a single, pointed question. If Student of the Year is not about achievement, then what is it about? The letter was bold, almost confrontational, but Amira knew she couldn't shrink any longer. The injustice had already stolen too much. When she showed it to Marcus, a senior who had graduated the year before and often mentored her, he whistled low. "You're going to stir the pot with this." "Good," Amira replied. The letter was sent the next morning, sealed in an envelope her father handed directly to the school secretary. By lunchtime, whispers spread that Amira had called out the principal. Some students looked at her with admiration. Others avoided her, afraid to be pulled into the storm. But for Amira, the choice had been made. She had knocked on the door until her hands bled, and still it hadn't opened. Now, she was ready to kick it down.
The summons came 2 days later, a slip delivered to Amira's homeroom, instructing her and her parents to meet with Principal Carter that afternoon. Her stomach twisted when she read it, but she folded the note and tucked it in her backpack. She had been waiting for this. When the time came, she walked into the principal's office flanked by her mother and father. The room smelled faintly of polished wood and stale coffee. Family photos lined the shelves behind the desk, framed certificates hung on the wall, a portrait of authority and order. Principal Carter rose to greet them with a politician's smile. "Thank you for coming in. Please sit." Amira sat, her folder on her lap, heart pounding but face steady. "I understand you have concerns," Carter began, folding his hands on the desk. "Let me assure you, the decision for Student of the Year is about more than grades. We consider attitude, leadership, the image of the school." "Image," Amira's father interrupted, his voice sharp. "You mean my daughter doesn't look the way you want your brochure to look?" Carter's smile tightened. "Mr. Lewis, that's not what I'm saying. Tyler demonstrates qualities. Tyler has lower grades, fewer awards, less community service," Amira cut in, her voice trembling but strong. She opened the folder, sliding papers across the desk. "Here are my transcripts, my competition results, the district science fair certificate, the GPA list with my name at the top. Tell me how this doesn't represent leadership." The room went silent. Carter glanced at the papers, then at Amira, his composure faltering. "Amira, you're an exceptional student, no one denies that. But these awards aren't only about academics. They're about who represents the spirit of our school." "And what spirit is that?" her mother demanded, her tone icy. "One that celebrates mediocrity as long as it comes in the right color?" The words hung in the air like a strike of thunder. Carter shifted uncomfortably, his fingers drumming on the desk. "Mrs. Lewis, I think you're misinterpreting." "No," Amira's father snapped. "We're naming what you won't. Bias. You didn't want my daughter's face on your posters. You didn't want to admit that the best student in this school doesn't look like what you're comfortable with." Carter's jaw clenched. He tried to steer the meeting back to calm, but the truth had already spilled into the room. Amira leaned forward, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I worked harder than anyone else. I earned it. And you chose to erase me. But I'm not going to be silent. If this is how you want to run this school, then the whole community deserves to know." Her father nodded. "We'll be taking this to the school board." Carter's face paled. For the first time, he looked less like a leader and more like a man cornered by his own choices. As the family rose to leave, Amira felt her chest tighten, not with fear, but with a strange new strength. The battle wasn't over. It was just beginning. And for once, she wasn't carrying it alone. That night, whispers spread through the neighborhood. Parents called parents. Students posted on social media. By morning, the story wasn't just Amira's. It was everyone's. By the end of the week, the story had spilled far beyond the school's walls. Parents spoke in hushed but heated tones outside classrooms. Teachers avoided eye contact in the hallways. And students whispered Amira's name with a mix of admiration and unease. The Lewis family's complaint reached the district school board, and soon investigators arrived. Two suited officials with clipboards and quiet, pointed questions. They reviewed transcripts, award criteria, and the mysterious leadership discussions that had conveniently excluded Amira. It didn't take long before inconsistencies emerged. One teacher, when pressed, admitted that the award decision had been guided by the principal. Another, more reluctantly, revealed that the administration had discussed how Amira might not photograph well for promotional material. Those words, once buried in private meetings, now sat exposed in official notes. When the findings became public, the outrage was immediate.
Parents flooded the district office with calls. Local reporters picked up the story. Top student overlooked, bias alleged in school award. At first, the administration tried to contain the damage. They issued a bland statement praising all students and insisting that no bias was intended. But the community wasn't buying it. Pressure mounted, and the district had no choice but to act. Within weeks, Principal Carter was placed on administrative leave pending review. A special assembly was called, where Amira, standing on the same stage where she had once been humiliated, was finally recognized as Student of the Year. The applause this time was different, louder, raw, and tinged with guilt from those who had clapped too easily for Tyler before. But for Amira, the trophy placed in her hands didn't erase what had happened. She smiled for the cameras, but inside she knew the recognition was overdue, a correction rather than a celebration. The true victory came later, when she was invited to speak at a citywide student leadership forum. Under the bright lights of a much larger stage, Amira delivered the speech she had once folded into her pocket. Her voice carried steady and strong across the auditorium. "We don't need favors. We don't need lowered bars. We need fairness. We need recognition for what we've earned, not for what someone else thinks we look like. And we will not be silent anymore." The crowd rose to their feet, applause crashing like a wave. This time, Amira didn't look down at her shoes. She lifted her chin, her eyes fierce and unafraid. The award she had been denied had sparked something bigger, a fire that could not be extinguished. Amira was no longer just a student. She was a symbol. And symbols, once lit, cannot be hidden.
Amira's story is not just about a single award or one unfair night. It is about the way entire systems can quietly erase excellence, about how bias hides behind polished words like leadership and image. For Amira, the pain of hearing another name called when she had done everything right was unforgettable. But what makes her story powerful is not the injustice itself. It is the way she chose to respond. She could have stayed silent. She could have let the moment pass, let the trophy slip away without a fight. But silence would have made her complicit in her own erasure. Instead, Amira gathered her proof, raised her voice, and forced the truth into the light. What began as one girl's heartbreak grew into a community's awakening. Her courage rippled outward, inspiring others to question, to speak, and to demand better. The award she eventually received was bittersweet, but it was never about the trophy. It was about dignity. It was about showing her parents, her classmates, and herself that her value was not negotiable, that the doors locked against her could be opened, not by permission, but by persistence. Amira's story carries a lesson for all of us. Merit should never be silenced by bias, and excellence should never be overshadowed by prejudice. It is a reminder that fairness in education is not just about grades on a page. It is about recognition, opportunity, and the courage to confront what's unjust. So if you've ever been overlooked, if you've ever felt invisible despite your hard work, let Amira's journey remind you, your voice matters. Knock louder. Push harder. Refuse to be silent. If Amira's story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop your thoughts in the comments. We read every one. And if you believe in voices that challenge injustice and demand fairness, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Together, we can amplify stories that must not be ignored.